This is a 12-row repeat worked on a multiple of 4 stitches plus 2. And the nature of the stitch is such that it makes the fabric really pull in a lot. But if you give your finished item a good block, it will open up the stitches and you can really see the bell pattern right here. You will also need a cable or double pointed needle for this stitch. And the stitch starts out working on the wrong side of the pattern. The first 5 rows are just knit 2, purl 2 ribbing, and rows 1, 3, and 5 are purl 2, knit 2, and then rows 2 and 4 are knit 2, purl 2. So I'm going to go ahead and work my 5 rows of ribbing, and then we'll show you row 6. Row 6 is where you will need your cable or double pointed needle, and that is one of the rows where the magic of this stitch is worked. We're ready to work row 6, and this is where you will need your cable needle. We're going to begin by knitting the first stitch and begin our repeat for the row. We're going to slip the next stitch on the left needle to your cable needle and hold it in front of your work. Then purl the next stitch on your left needle. And now what we're going to do is skip over this first stitch, and we're going to knit the second stitch and pass it over the first stitch. And it can be a little tricky and take some getting used to, but with practice you can get it with no problem. So right needle goes into the second stitch as if to knit, and you're going to knit the stitch and then pass it over that first stitch. Now we're going to knit the stitch from the cable needle. I'll slide that back on my left needle and knit that stitch. And now you're going to purl the stitch that was skipped. And that's all you're going to be doing for the rest of the row. Slip the next stitch onto your cable needle and hold it in front of your work. Purl the next stitch on your left needle. We're going to skip the first stitch here and knit the second stitch, passing it over the first. So right needle goes into that second stitch, just as if you were making a regular knit stitch. Knit and pass it over that first stitch. Knit the stitch from your cable needle. And now purl the stitch that you skipped before. Next stitch goes onto your cable needle. Hold it in front of your work. Purl one. Skip the first stitch and knit into the second. Pass it over the first one. Knit the stitch from your cable needle. And purl the skipped stitch. It might seem awkward at first, but since that is all you're doing on this row and the last row of the pattern, you'll get lots of practice, and it should get easier for you as you continue knitting. If you have needles with a sharper point, those will help you get into that second stitch a little bit easier. You can still do it with needles that have a bit of a blunt point like mine here. It just might be a little trickier to get. And when you get to your last stitch of row 6, you're just going to knit it. That's all. So you can see here the little twist that we got by holding that stitch in front of our fabric and working them a bit out of order there. Okay, so now we're going to do rows 7 through 11, and again we're going to be working in the knit 2, purl 2 ribbing. So that's rows 7, 9, and 11. I'm going to knit 2, purl 2, and rows 8 and 10 I'm going to purl 2, knit 2. So let me do that, and then I will show you the last row of the pattern. Okay, here we are for row 12, which is the final row of the pattern. And this is pretty much the same as row 6, just a little bit differently at the beginning and end of the row. Row 12, we're going to start out by knitting the first stitch. And then you're going to skip the next stitch on your left needle. And you're going to knit into the second one and pass it over the first stitch, just like you did above. And then you're going to purl your skipped stitch. And now, until we get to the end of the row, we will be doing the same as we did before. You're going to repeat from the star up in row 6. And it's slip the next stitch on your left needle to your cable needle and just hold it in front of your work. Purl the next stitch on your left needle. Skip over the first stitch, knit into the second stitch on your left needle, and pass it over the first stitch. Then you're going to knit the stitch from your cable needle. And then purl your skipped stitch. And don't worry if you make a mistake or something goes wrong. You can just rip your yarn out and start over. If you're not very experienced with knitting with cable needles or skipping stitches and working stitches behind them, I would suggest using maybe a cheaper yarn to practice on before you use the yarn that you want to use for your project. Like I said, the stitch really isn't hard, but it does take a little bit of getting used to since you're working stitches out of order and using a cable needle. There's no shame in ripping out and starting over. That's how you learn. Everybody has to learn sometime, and we've all ripped projects out and started over, even experienced knitters. Slip the stitch onto your cable needle and hold it in front. Purl the next stitch on your left needle. Skip the next stitch. Knit into the second. Pass that stitch over the first. Knit the stitch from your cable needle. And purl the skipped stitch. So when you get to the last 3 stitches of row 12, this is how it's worked. Slip the next stitch onto your cable needle and hold it in front as you have been doing. You're going to purl the next stitch on your left needle. And then you're going to knit the stitch from your cable needle. And then knit the last stitch. And you would repeat those 12 rows for the pattern. And as I mentioned before, the fabric really pulls in, as you can see here. It's hard to see the pattern. But if you give your finished item a good blocking, it will really open up those stitches, and you can see the bell shape here. And of course, the best yarn to use for blocking is an animal fiber or a natural fiber such as wool. You can try to do it with a synthetic yarn, but it really holds its shape if you use wool.